the different countries, what went on in the Jewish community, and we're going to explore Argentina. Now, friends, this is a part 2. We did part 1 where we really spoke about pre-20th century time period or up till the World War I itself, respectively. So now we're going to, this might be in another 2 sections we might have. This might be a part 2 and part 3 also. But let's continue over here. Now we're talking about World War II time period. We're going to speak about some of the famous rabbis from Argentina, respectively, and so on and so forth. So the 20th century, we spoke, let's just say, with regards to pre-World War II more in the last series. But with regards to World War II and anti-Semitism, now Argentina kept its doors open to Jewish immigration until 1938, when the terrible Hitler and the Nazis in Germany began to make, let's say, more actions against Jews. At that point in time, friction would come all across Europe in preparation for the war at that stage in time. So I think the government imposed new regulations on immigration. It was severely curtailed at a time of increasing persecution of Jews and the outbreak of the Second World War, when Jews, they sought a safe haven from the Nazis. Now, among the refugees who found exile in Argentina were numerous, for example, musicians. That was one example actually given over by Wikipedia. Although, let's say, they were warned on several occasions by German authorities to repatriate its Jewish citizens, the Argentine government refused to repatriate its approximately 100 nationals living in German-occupied Europe before the country severed diplomatic relations with the terrible Nazis under the Allied pressure in January 1944. All, I think, were believed to have been exterminated. Now, there was someone of the name Juan Domingo Perón. He rose to power in 1946 in Argentina after the war that worried many Jewish people in the country at that point in time. As Minister of War, he had signed Argentina's declaration of war against the Axis powers, but as a nationalist, he had earlier expressed sympathy for them. He was known to be an admirer of the Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini over there, and Perón introduced Catholic religious instruction in Argentina public schools. He allowed terrible Nazis fleeing persecution in Germany to immigrate to the country, and Perón also expressed sympathy for Jewish rights, and in 1949 he would establish diplomatic relations with Israel. At that point in time, remember, the formation of the State of Israel was in 1948. Perón's government was the first in Argentina to allow Jewish citizens and to hold office. Now, among the most notable, let's just say, Nazis who immigrated to Argentina was the terrible Adolf Eichmann. He was a high-ranking official who had supervised, unfortunately, all those death camps he did over there. He lived near Buenos Aires from after World War II until 1960. Now, Israeli agents would track him down. They would abduct him from Buenos Aires, suburb to Israel, for trial for war crimes. And Eichmann faced trial in Jerusalem beginning in April 1961. He was convicted of crimes against humanity and was thankfully hanged in May 1962. He was at that stage in time. So that was something that we have to point out. I think among the most notable, I think Perón was overthrown in 1955 until, let's just say, I think with the unrest, I think there was unleashing, there was a wave of anti-Semitism. Since then, I think more than 45,000 will go to Israel from Argentina. And others migrated to various places in Europe and other destinations. I think in the 1950s, especially, many would actually come in about that point in time. There was unfortunately a lot of anti-Semitism all over Argentina. Now, as I mentioned before, it would be so many people, I think in the 1950s and 1960s, the Tikkur nationalistic movement, which was a fascist organization with political ties, began a series of anti-Semitic campaigns. They encouraged street fights against Jews and vandalism of synagogues and Jewish cemeteries, respectively, over there. Now, we're talking about the junta rule period. Now, between 1976 and 1983, Argentina was ruled by a military junta that oppressed many, and they disappeared countless victims. And during this period, Jewish people were prime target of military government, in part because many opposed the dictator, but also due to the Nazi ideology which permeated the ranks of the military. with some generals, as saying, being obsessed with Jewish question in of itself. Some sections, the military government believed in the Argentina plan. Now, what was that? I think it was a fictional Israeli conspiracy to take over part of the Patagonia region and establish a second Jewish state over there. So remember, there was all throughout Jewish history, unfortunately, we've had all these different conspiracies put against us and so on and so forth. And that very much happened over here. Now, friends, anyone tuning in live, please subscribe to the channel. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers over here on this channel. So please subscribe at the moment as we're talking about the history of the Argentinian Jewish community over here. So please join and welcome everyone if you are new. So there was those conspiracies against the Jewish community over there. Some Jewish prisoners, let's say, were interrogated over knowledge of Argentina plan and were even asked to provide details of the Israeli military preparations for an invasion of southern Argentina. During the period of military rule, people who opposed the government were arrested, imprisoned, and would disappear at that point in time, being subjected to torture and execution. And Jewish victims were singled out for especially harsh treatment. The number of Jewish victims may have been as high as 3,000 people, which is a staggering amount. Despite being less than 1% of the population, Jews made up around 12% of victims of the military regime of the, which is a huge figure comparatively. There one Jewish person, I think named Jacobo Timmerman, he was a journalist who extensively covered government atrocities during the Dirty War, became the single most political prisoner of the entire Dirty War following his arrest and imprisonment. Timmerman was eventually released largely as a result of the United States and Israeli diplomatic pressure and was expelled from Argentina. He lived in Israel until the junta fall at that point in time. Now, it's actually interesting. Israel had a special agreement, I believe, with Argentina military government to allow Jewish people arrested for political crimes to immigrate to Israel, citing an Argentine law that allowed Argentine citizens imprisoned to emigrate if another country was willing to take them in. Now, Israel diplomats in Argentina helped organize immigration of Jewish dissidents who had been arrested, many of these people falsely. This included leftist activists whose arrests had nothing to do with their Jewish origins, as well as official Israeli governmental efforts to secure the release and immigration of imprisoned Jews. I think many Israeli embassy personnel also took extensive independent efforts to rescue Jewish prisoners. The number of Argentine Jews emigrating to Israel greatly increased throughout the period of the junta. Some Jews also emigrated to Spain at that point in time, other European countries, and the United States of America. And that's something that very much we should speak about in of itself. So that's very interesting. Friends, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of the Argentinian Jewish community, so please subscribe to the channel. We've got fantastic content over here, which we have to point out over here. So welcome everyone, and welcome to our community. I think the number of Argentine Jews emigrating to Israel greatly increased throughout the period of the junta, as I mentioned before. I think that there was a Hebrew immigrant aid society. They secured at that point in time a prize from the government of Brazil to provide temporary asylum to 350,000 Jews of Argentina if it became necessary. And in 1976, the US State Department promised Rabbi Alexander Schindler of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations that would issue 100,000 visas for Argentine Jewish refugees if it became necessary. Come 1982, there was a Falklands War. Around 250 Jewish soldiers served in the Falkland Islands and strategic points in the Patagonia, let's just say in of itself. During their service, they suffered anti-Semitic attacks by officers. The Argentine government allowed 5 rabbis to visit them. These were the only chaplains permitted to accompany the Argentine army during the conflict, and were the only non-Catholic chaplains ever permitted to serve. According to the author Hernan Dobry, the rabbis were permitted to visit Jewish soldiers because Argentina had been buying arms from Israel and did not want to risk the relationship for the sake of the 5 rabbis at that point in time. So very interesting. Friends, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of the country Argentina. Please subscribe to the channel, friends, over here. as we are learning about the science of what went on in Argentina in the history. Now, 1983 would see, let's say, a period of return to democracy, respectively. I think in 1983, Raúl Alfonsín was democratically elected as president of Argentina. Alfonsín enjoyed the support of the Jewish population and appointed many Jewish people into high positions. Now, it's actually interesting. When Carlos Saul Menem, who was, I think, of Syrian descent, he was elected a president in 1989. His Arab background and previous, let's say, support of Peron worried the Jewish people, but he proved to be a more tolerant, let's just say at that point in time, leader. Menem appointed many Jewish people to his government. He visited Israel a number of times and offered to help mediate the Israeli-Arab peace process. After, I think there was a Jewish cemetery was desecrated in Buenos Aires, Menem immediately expressed his outrage to the Jewish community of what actually occurred over there. Within, I think, a week, his government had apprehended those responsible. So he took action when it came to anti-Semitism, let's just say, at that stage in time. President Menem also ordered the release of files relating to Argentina's role in serving as a haven for Nazi war criminals. In 1988, the Argentine parliament passed a law against racism and anti-Semitism. In the 1990s, two major terrorist attacks in Argentina killed and wounded numerous Jewish people. Neither has been solved. I think in March 1992, the Israeli embassy was bombed, killing 29 people. This likely reflected international tensions between Israel and Arabs, including the Palestinians at that stage in time. So friends, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of the Argentinian Jewish community, so please subscribe to the channel now and join our community. Obviously, you can see the anti-Semitism that really took place at that point in time. Now, come on. I think it was July 1994. The Jewish Community Center, also known as AMIA, in Buenos Aires was bombed, killing 85 people and wounding more than 200. The community's archives were partially destroyed in the bombing, and in 2005, an Argentine prosecutor said the AMIA bombing was carried out by a 21-year-old Lebanese suicide bomber who belonged to Hezbollah, and in 2006, Argentine justice indicted 7 high-ranking former Iranian officials and one senior Hezbollah member at that point in time, charged with participating in the planning and execution of the AMIA bombing. In 2007, Interpol ordered a red notice to capture the Iranian fugitives. And also, I think since then, the Argentine government had requested that Iran, let's just say, extradite the Iranian citizens accused of the attack in order to be judged by Argentinian foreign court at that point in time. But Iran refused. And in response to the deadly attack, Miguel Angel Pichetto, the senator from Peronocist Front de Victor, and later running mate of the Mauricio Macri in 2019 presidential election, said the real Argentines and the Jewish Argentines were killed, a saying reflecting the attitudes towards Jews in the country in those days. Now, I think 21st century saw there was an economic crisis between 1999 to 2002. Approximately 4,400 Argentine Jews would make Aliyah to Israel. Following the 2003 economic recovery and subsequent growth, Argentine immigration to Israel leveled off, and some who had left for Israel returned to Argentina. Although I think some 10,000 Argentine Jews immigrated to Israel during the 2000s, due to economic situation, several Jewish institutions such as schools, community centers, clubs and congregations would merge at that stage in time. So that's very, very interesting. So yeah, that's very interesting. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history with regards to Argentinian Jewish community over here. So please welcome to our channel over here as we explore the history. And now we're talking more 21st century. At the moment, let's speak about the Buenos Aires Jewish community. We spoke more about it yesterday. We talked about how 19th century the Jewish community was established. The first synagogue was inaugurated in 1875. In 1990, we said that there was a general strike in Buenos Aires where there were unfortunately pogroms that took place at that point in time, which targeted Jews and their properties. And we talked about how European Jews continued to immigrate to Argentina, especially in the Great Depression of the 1930s, to escape the Nazi persecution. And we talked about how Jewish culture and religious organizations would flourish in cities with Ladino presses, Yiddish presses in Buenos Aires at that point in time. A Jewish hospital would be there, Zionistic organizations, and the Sweet Migdal organization was established in the 1860s, way earlier on in Buenos Aires. That would be over there, and very much so. I think today, approximately 180,000 Jewish people, maybe even slightly more, Jewish people live in Argentina. But however, in the early 1960s, there was 310,000 Jewish people living there. Most of Argentine Jews live in Buenos Aires, Cordoba, and Rosario. I think Argentina's Jewish population is the largest in Latin America and the third largest in Americas, after the United States of America and Canada. It's the sixth largest in the world. Also, it's very, very interesting. So, it is also the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, and arguably encompasses over half of all Jewish Spanish language native speakers. That's something that we have to point out at that point in time. Additionally, Buenos Aires is the 16th largest city in the world by population. The government has recognized major Jewish holidays over there. It authorizes, let's say, Jewish people to have 2 days of vacation, each for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the first days of Pesach, also respectively, Passover. I mean, our friends, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of the Jewish community of Argentina over here. So don't forget to smash that subscribe button now and join our community. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers, friends. Let's explore a few of the great rabbis of yesteryear from Argentina, some of the famous rabbis that will make their mark in Argentina. One rabbi that passed away relatively recently, about 17 years ago, actually 21st of Tishrei, Harav Yosef Gadno. He was actually born in the year 1951. He passed away in 2008. He was about 57 years of age when he passed away. What's interesting is he was actually born in Buenos Aires in Argentina. He was, and he got married to his wife Marat Ruth. I think she was a daughter, I think, of Rabbi Yaakov Kirat, if I'm not mistaken, and Rabbinit Esther Sultan Dabach, if I'm not mistaken. So really came from the Sultan Dabach family, be a key rabbinic family in Argentina, respectively. They would come, and we're going to mention a few of the rabbis also from that community itself. I think in 1980 he would actually go to the land of Israel over there. So he was about in his late 20s. He would settle in the Gilo neighborhood over there, would learn in the famous kollel, the Or HaMeir, also respectively, and Yad Harav Nisim. He was ordained to rabbinate and the Dayanut. He became a judge through Rishon LeZion, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, very, very key figure at that point in time, and he became well remembered from Argentina pedigree itself, respectively. And I think what's interesting is he would form in Gilo a synagogue called the Abi Ezer. And I think he knew going to really wondrous, very different sermons, especially on Shabbat, and very great drashot in of itself, and really was a people's person. And I think he would also live in Ramot in Jerusalem. He would work over there, if I'm not mistaken. And I think for many years he would be working in the rabbinate there. He was the head of Jewish court, if I'm not mistaken. And he would work as a rabbi in various different moshav settlements in Israel, respectively, and especially Mateh Ben Yamin, and was a rabbi of the Yeshuv Beit area, if I'm not mistaken. And he did suffer in his life various different health problems, and I think in 2008 he passed away. But he was from Argentina, one of the most famous, you could say, Argentine-born rabbis, especially in Israel. That's something we have to point out also very, very much so. He would bring about many different great books, if I'm not mistaken, including the Chacham Yosef, which was in 3 different volumes, the Yad Yosef, which was in, I think, 3 volumes also, the Chaim Yosef, Hilchot Avelut, and Shut Shelot, Shabbat question and answers books, and various other books also. So he was a very, very famous rabbi of his time in Israel, but he was from Buenos Aires, respectively. Now, another great rabbi from Argentina, who was actually born in 1880 and passed away in 1948, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Mizrahi. He was a great rabbi. I believe his Hilula is actually 7th of Adar, if I'm not mistaken. He came from great auspices. I think his father, his mother was Marat Esther, if I'm not mistaken, and his father, Rabbi Moshe, I think he was actually born in 1888. I think actually Lebanon he was born in, respectively, over there. And I think in 1908 he was ordained as a rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, in Beit Midrash of the Rabbanim. I think of the rabbis in Damascus also, respectively. We have to point out 1909. We'll see that he would actually go, I think, to Argentina at that point in time. He was there and was really, really doing huge amounts also in Argentina. So he was another key rabbi. And I think there was a young Kehila over there of the Damascus Jewish community in Buenos Aires. He would actually leave. And he would start up the organizations inside the Kehila itself, respectively. And there were many, many thousands of people he would actually inspire over there. בוקר ברקס, בבתי פתח כניס, הוא התלמוד תורה, ששימש גם מקום לתפילה. Really brought about various places for Torah learning and prayer itself. לאחר מכן, היה שותף בהקמת חברת בני אמת. He would start up the B'nai Emet organization, Beit Almin, חברת ביקור חולים, ביקור חולים over there, חברת Gimulut Chasadim also. And I think in 1919 he formed a big Knesset called the Agudat Yedidim in the Baruch Olim, and 1920 also formed up another big Knesset, a Beit Sefer, a more modern one called the Or HaTorah, if I'm not mistaken. And he was the head of the Beit Sefer over there also, took on various different undertakings, I should say, in of itself. So he was a key figure in Argentina at that stage in time. So I think he would encourage people to learn Ivrit at that point in time, and education. I think many of the women, he would there a better, let's just say, a more formal structure of education over there. And he was famous. I think he passed away in 1948, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not too sure if he actually passed away on the 7th of Adar or not. The Homey website is not sure about the mark his Hilul on that specific date in of itself. So I think he published works, if I'm not mistaken, including the book called the Zerach Yaakov. That was another one of various different drashot, let's just say, in of itself. And he was just a famous rabbi of Islam, once again from Argentina, once again making his mark, definitely inside that country, inside the country itself, respectively. And very, very interesting. I think his wife's name was Rabbanit Leah Moas, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very, very interesting. Now, another famous rabbi from Argentina, Rabbi Yitzchak Eliyahu Leniardo. He passed away actually in 1918. I think Yud Zayin Tishrei is his Kilula. So he was actually from Syria originally, if I'm not mistaken. So Laniardo family was a famous rabbinic family from Syria. I think he would learn Torah, if I'm not mistaken, among the great great rabbis and Kabbalists also over there, and really, really was doing huge amounts of kiruv, let's just say, Marbitz Torah in of itself. His brother, I believe, was Rabbi Shlomo Raphael Leniardo, who would actually make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, if I'm not mistaken, and would be one of the great earlier rabbis, let's just say, in Yeshiva, Barat Yosef in Jerusalem, respectively. Now, it's actually interesting. Rabbi Yitzchak Eliyahu Leniardo, I think in about 1912, would go to New York over there. And then he would go to Buenos Aires, making his mark in Argentina, along with Rabbi Shaul Saton Dabach, who was another great rabbi over there. We've spoken about the Saton Dabach family, and he would become the head of a Kehila over there, and that would, let's just say, help forming, let's just say, the foundations within regards to a Torah community over there. And I think Rabbi Yitzchak Eliyahu Leniardo passed away, and Rabbi Shaul Saton Dabach would actually eulogize him at that point in time. And I'm not. It says actually over here, Chacham Yitzchak Eliyahu Leniardo, הספדו מרורות חכם שאול סתון דבח, אף שציווה שלא להספדו. חכם שאול דבח פסק כי חסיד מפורסם וקנאי גדול כזה, אין שומעים לו או מצווה להפסידו הספד גדול בבית כנסת. Very interestingly enough, so much can be said within regards to him. He was a great rabbi, some Rabbi Laniardo. I think reported about various rabbis from the Laniardo family, respectively, over there. So that's something I will. Matztikei Rabim, he was a rabbi that really, really did a huge amount of Torah in of itself. So he passed away actually in 1918, about 107 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. His book, the Yisrael Yitzchak, I think, which actually would come out in the year 1912, if I'm not mistaken. And another book, I think, would come out in the year 1928 with regard to him. But he really made his mark in Argentina. Now, Rabbi Shaul David Sultan, he was a Sultan Dabach, Rabbinic dynasty, was another great rabbi of his time. Let's speak about him now. Friends, anyone tuning in live, please subscribe to the channel now. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers. We've got fantastic content over here. So who was Rav Shaul? I think we spoke about him a bit in the previous video, if I'm not mistaken. He was born in 1850 or 1851, if I'm not mistaken. And his father was Rabbi David Sultan, really a great rabbi. He would grow up among the knees of the great rabbis of his generation, especially there was Rabbi Moshe Sultan Dabach, another great rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, who will be educated. That's something that we have to point out. I think 1877 he was appointed a Dayan, and he would become part of the Bet Din in Syria, originally in Khalab, in Aleppo. 1881 he would actually move, I think, in Tab, if I'm not mistaken, and work as a rabbi of the city over there for, I think, 10 years. 1891 he would return to Aleppo. He would form a yeshiva over there, among auspices of many rabbanim. In 1912 I think he would actually visit his son in Buenos Aires, if I'm not mistaken, in Argentina. And at that point in time, he would work. לשמש רב ראשי של קהילת יהודית של יוצאי חלב, with domestic I think he would actually help with in regards to the chief rabbinate over there, also respectively in Argentina, really making his mark over there, and would really strengthen the people in the Jewish community over there. I think he was working with in regards to Shechita and the Kashrut over there. He would form, I think, over there various different Torah Mosdots, foundations. In 1920, he helped form the Irgun Yisod Hadat, which would really strengthen. He formed the Talmud Torah, also a Torah organization, which educated hundreds of children over there. Various poor people and rich people also, in of itself, and really was worried about the general Torah structure in of itself. And let's just say in of itself. So I think in 1924 he would actually form the Irgun Ahavat Tzedek and also Chevra Kedisha, which was under the name Chesed Shel Emet. Very interesting. Now I think he would also form a Bet Din also, and in Argentina. So you can see he was a key figure in Argentine history, Rabbi Daba was it correctly. And he would be conversing and speaking to various different great rabbis, leading rabbis across the world in regards to who פעל כנגד בעלי תפקידים ציבוריים, שמרו תפקידים, ובשל בעיה של גיורים ונישאי תורה. There was problems, I think, with conversions at that point in time. Just like, remember we spoke about the Syrian community that did various different takanot. So that was also a problem there. תיקן תקנה לאסור גיורים בארגנטינה, וכל הרוצה להתגייר ייסע לירושלים. צבנה ותוכנן, אולי יקבלוהו בשל התנגדותו ללימוד בעברית כשווה צורה, מצא עצמו בעימות עם ראשי קהילה. So that was something that was a big topic at that point in time. I think his book, the Davar Shaul, it was a shoot on the 4 parts of the Code of Jewish Law, would actually come out in 1928. He passed away on the 19th of Sivan in 1930. And I think he was buried in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll have to double check that also. But he was another key rabbi in Argentine Jewish history. Now, another famous Argentinian rabbi, without that, Rabbi Jose Feyor. We've spoken about on various occasions before. He's more recently passed away in 2020. He was actually born in 1934. He was a famous Sephardic Chacham. He was an educator, he was a scholar. He was a rabbi in the Syrian Jewish community in Brooklyn for many years. He was also a professor, most famously in the Jewish Theological Seminary in America, and I think in the Serpetus Institute of Jewish Learning and Leadership. He was also part of Bar Ilan University. He was a professor of law at the Netanya Academic College. He was actually born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and belonged to the Damascus Syrian Jewish community of that specific city, and was tutored, let's just say, in Jewish subjects by several Sephardic rabbis that were actually, I think, were hired by his parents to this end. I think Eliyahu Fro, respectively, cited as Feyor, you could say, his principal teacher. the spiritual head of the Damascus community in Argentina, and would teach Rabbi Fior fundamentals of Talmud, Jewish law, and rabbinics. Other teachers included a famous rabbi named Rabbi Eliyahu Suri. He was another rabbi, I believe, in Argentina. Rabbi Jamil Harari, another rabbi there, and Rab Aharon HaKohen. These are great rabbis in themselves. And Rabbi Fior would later on really recredit them with an excellent teaching, let's say, standards in of itself. He actually quoted Rabbi Joseph Fur about the level of education, rabbinic education, and the teaching for education in the highest terms. He says they never assumed an arrogant attitude towards their students or anyone else. They were accessible to all and encouraged contrary views and free discussion. And the truth was a result of collective effort in which everyone had equal access to share, rather than being imposed by an individual or a superior mind. Following Sephardic educational tradition, the teaching was methodical and comprehensive. Very interesting enough, he would talk about and was a scene of quoting. Before one began to study Talmud, it was expected of him to have a solid knowledge of the scripture, of Mishnayot, the famous anthology, the Ein Yaakov, the Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, and other basic texts. Now, Rabbi Jose Fuel would get married to Rabbinit Esther Cohen, I think in February 1963. He had 3 children. Ora, Rabbi Abe, I think it was Rabbi, and Miriam also. His son Abed obviously continued the rabbinic path and would receive rabbinic ordination. Now, I believe he passed away in Netanya on the 9th of June in 2020. He was 86 years of age at that point in time. So he had a very decorative education, Rabbi Fior did. I think he began teaching, actually. Let's just explore his rabbinic career. He taught in the Ahi Ezer congregation and opened a yeshiva in Brooklyn, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he brought many people back to halachic observance and created a renaissance in the learning of Torah in accordance with the Sephardic traditions. I think someone named Ralph Betesh, if I'm not mistaken, later one of the leaders of the Jewish community, recounts how for the first time people had heard great Sephardic luminaries such as Rabbi Don Isaac Abravanel, Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakadu, Rabbi Moshe Hefetz, respectively. Rabbi Fur's influence in bringing the younger generation back to the traditions of halacha and Torah was very substantial, and many of the community's lay and religious leaders were his students, or students of students. Very famous people, I think Dennis Dweck, Rav Moshe Shama, Mickey Carey, if I'm not mistaken. This was actually quoted in Wikipedia, if I'm not mistaken. So he was very, very decorative in his. I think he would be in correspondence with famous Rabbi David De Silopol and Rabbi Matlub Abadi, who was the leader of Syrian Jewish community in Brooklyn, who was originally actually from Aleppo, also respectively in the Chalab. I think Rabbi Fur accepted a faculty position, which was maybe seen more controversial at the time, obviously, at the Jewish Theological Seminary in America, in New York City. I think he would have a close relationship with Abraham Joshua Heschel. Remember, this was seen as a controversial move. I think at one stage, if I'm not mistaken, there will be a huge friction at the end between the Jewish Theological Seminary and Jose Fior at the end, if I'm not mistaken. But if I'm not mistaken, this position itself was, it says over here he would sue a breach of contract of the Jewish Theological Seminary because they admitted woman in like a manner he didn't approve of, and the seminary was ineffective, forcing him to resign, if I'm not mistaken. He actually would receive a support at that point in time from various rabbis in the Syrian Jewish community, among reported over Rabbi Yaakov Kassin, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a very famous itself. And I think there was allegations against Rabbi Fior, and Rabbi Shalom Mashash, if I'm not mistaken, would become chief rabbi of Israel at one stage, and so maybe Jerusalem would actually investigate within regards to him. And very interesting enough. So that I think at the end of that specific bet, then Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu would state about the kosherness within regards to Rabbi Fior of itself, respectively. So he was a famous rabbi of his time, and I think later on he would be part of the Bar Ilan faculty in Ramat Gan, also respectively. He would teach Talmud there and was involved with the Tanya Academic College, also respectively. Now let's talk about more present time period of Argentina. Our present rabbi is Rabbi Isaac Saka, or Rabbi Isaac Antebi Saka. He, I believe, is the Sephardic chief rabbi of Buenos Aires, as well as the founder and president of the Menorah and organization of Jewish youth. Let's explore a bit with regards to his life and education. He's a more current rabbi. He was born in the year 1964, and he was born in Buenos Aires into a Jewish family from Aleppo and Eastern Europe. He would study at the Yeshivat Yisodadat, a community in Buenos Aires that, let's say, keeps Aleppo's Jewish traditions. There, I think he became a distinguished student of Chacham Yitzchak Shebeha. I think he was a chief rabbi of Argentina at that stage in time, very interesting enough. And I think between 1981 to 1984, Rabbi Isaac Saka would study at the famous Yeshivat Porat Yosef, which is located obviously in the old city of Jerusalem, a place we visited on this channel before. And between 1985 to 1989, he studied at the famous Yechevei Dat Beit Midrash. Within the first group of students it's ever had. It was directed by Chacham Ovadia Yosef, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who afterwards granted him rabbinical ordination as tzmicha. Now, Rabbi Saka, I think, is considered one of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's closest students. Very, very interesting. Now, friends, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the Jewish history of the Argentinian Jewish community over here. So please subscribe to the channel now. Join our community. We've got fantastic content over here as we're exploring some of the great rabbis of yesteryear from Argentina. We're speaking about Rabbi Isaac Saka, who's a current head rabbi in Argentina, respectively. Now, yes, I think it was between 1989 to 1997. He led the youth department at Yisodadat and taught, I believe, at the Bet David Yeshiva within the same community. In 1996, we found the Menorah organization. That the aims and targets over there was to strengthen the Jewish identity and really spread religious values among the youth community in Argentina. I think since 1997, Rabbi Saka has been, let's just say, the Sephardic chief rabbi in Buenos Aires. In 2019, he started and promoted a joint university program within the University of Palomero in Buenos Aires, catered for Orthodox Jews, unique in Latin America, and Menorah Up. I think since then, more than 140 Jewish students studied on his program, at least at at least four different careers. He did interfaith work also. He's done. He would meet and discuss different topics with interfaith leaders, with multiple religions and political leaders. Among them, I think the Pope Francis, with whom he has met several times since a period of the Pope, of the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, respectively, over there. So he's also published many works, if I'm not mistaken. The Otzorot Chachmei Aram Tzova, for example, over there. Al-Harambam. It contains, I think, this work, interpretations and commentaries, if I'm not mistaken, on the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, the Sefer Hamadah, respectively. I think it was written by the great sages of Aleppo in all generations. I think the Mechtabei Halacha Yitzchak Yiranen, including various halachic writings and answers by Rabbi Yitzchak Sheheba, who was a chief rabbi of the Jews from Aleppo in Buenos Aires, who we've spoken about, I think, in a previous video also before. I think he would write more books also, Kasher, for example, which was published in 2024 quite recently, and Ena Mardos, which was published this year, 2025. I think he would also translate books, including the Chazon Ovadia, Pesach Laws and Haggadah, which is originally written by Chacham Ovadia Yosef, I think in 1989, which was actually published by the Midrash Sephardi over there. Also another one, the Hamot Dam, was a halachic, let's say, resolutions on Jewish festivals, which is also, I think, written originally by Rav David Yosef and was published by Yechevei Dat Beit Midrash, I think, in 1990, respectively. Now, another famous rabbi, we're going to speak more about him soon. I think current Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Argentina is Rabbi Gabriel Davidovich. We're going to speak about him. I think he has led the community since 2013, so we're going to speak about him in due course, maybe next 20, 30 minutes, respectively, over there. Other famous rabbis, I think there was another famous rabbi, a chief rabbi, was Rabbi Salmon ben Hammou, Rabbi, as I said before, Rabbi Yosef Shehebar. They were key rabbis in Argentina at various different stages in time. Now, another chief rabbi, I believe, of Argentina, especially in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken, he would also be, I think it was between 1929 to 1931, was Rabbi Shabtai Jayin. Now, I think he would be not just the chief rabbi of Argentina at the same time, but also at the same time the chief rabbi of Uruguay during that point in time. He'd also be the chief rabbi before Macedonia and later on in Romania, and take on various different important roles, so to say. I think he was the chief rabbi of Romania between years 1931 to 1944, respectively. He actually immigrated to Argentina in 1928. He would serve as the chief rabbi of the Sephardic community then, and coupled with Uruguay also. And I think he would speak famously in the great synagogue of Argentina. He would make efforts to unite the Sephardic communities. I think he founded the Sephardic Rabbinic Consistory of Argentina in 1928. I think it would only last for a couple of years. He promoted the study of Hebrew language. He promoted writing and directed Ladina, various different plays also. He would visit various Talmud Torah classes and give prizes, let's just say, to outstanding students. He founded the Club of the Sephardic Jewish Youth over there, and was seen very much as a people's person that would be traveling constantly to all the Jewish communities. And I think he initiated holding of a conference of Hebrew teachers, if I'm not mistaken, at one stage in time. I don't know if it really worked out or not, but he was very, I think he was visit various other countries nearby, like Chile, and was just checking really the whole rabbinic structure in of itself. And I think he meet various different foreign ministers of various different countries. So he was very well, let's just say, received by many of the diplomats and the foreign officials and the secular people in of itself. And so he was a chief Sephardi rabbi for a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he was more on the modern side of the rabbinic structure coin, you could say, in of itself. So that is something I will definitely point out over there. But he would eventually leave after a couple of years and go to Romania, if I'm not mistaken. Now, another rabbi, I think Rabbi Dr. David Kahana was a chief rabbi also of Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. He was, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was actually a former rabbi in Warsaw at one stage in time. I was named the chief rabbi of Argentina. I think it was actually Tzvi Venkhurst who actually originally, who was the president of the Central Council of the Jewish communities in Argentina of Buenos Aires, Cahila, if I'm not mistaken, would actually inaugurate him at that point in time, or announce it. And he was the author of many different books in Halacha, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was a Polish army chaplain also previously, I think during the Nazi invasion. And he would serve as the chief rabbi of the Polish forces, if I'm not mistaken, and in the territories liberated from Nazis. And he was also the chairman of the Va'at Kehilot in Poland. And he would immigrate in 1950 to Israel, but will eventually become the chief rabbi of Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. Now there are there's other Reform rabbis. We're an Orthodox Jewish channel, so I'm not going to speak about the Reform rabbis so much over here. I'll state that on the outset over here. And there's a whole thing. There's the religious schools, there's secular schools, especially 20th century in earlier parts. Now there's many Jewish schools in Argentina. There's many yeshivot. There's many Chabad centers currently in Argentina, respectively. But let's speak about the early parts of the 1900s in regards to schools. I think at the beginning of the 20th century, various ideological organizations would establish more modern and secular schools, while there were also religious schools at that point in time. I think there was development, and there was, in of itself, various different committees, education communities, in of itself. I think there was a trend of secularization at that point in time in many of the different countries which we've spoken about. In many, if I'm not mistaken, there was various different, Zionism was booming at that point in time. Modern schools, let's just say there was Jewish culture was trying to be promoted. There was ideological from political organizations such as the Poale Tzion, the Bund. Many progressives and general Zionists would actually try and bring about things. But I think there was also religious schools opening up where various different children, I think until the end of the 1960s, these schools together with almost all Jewish schools operated for several hours a day, or 5 days a week, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the school day in public schools was only 4 hours a day. I think morning and afternoon shifts, and Jewish schools were able to operate during the pupils' free times also, if I'm not mistaken. So I think at that point in time there were many women teachers also, if I'm not mistaken. So at that window of time in the school system, that's something definitely to point out. So I think in general, I think, for example, the secular schools preceded traditional and religious schools. For example, would have women pupils over there. Many women would actually be teaching in these more secular schools, if I'm not mistaken. And the schools, let's just say, for Damascus and Aleppo community were usually more conservative schools, let's just say, in themselves, more religious. You could say Ashkenazic schools are more on the secular trend, let's just say, in of itself. And especially in the 1930s, especially we're speaking about Rabbi Sultan Daba, and let's just say he would bring a first point in time, I think the first non-Ashkenazic school to change. There was a Hatikva religious school established in Jerusalem, community of immigrants from Palestine. And that was the help of several activists, it's known as Askanim, from Aleppo, who wanted to introduce innovations to Jewish education. The establishment of this religious school was the result of an ideological and educational revolution. And in 1928, the chairman of Congregation Yesod Hadat, comprised of immigrants from Aleppo, and invited a young teacher from Palestine, Ben Sion Danieli, to teach in the community's religious school using the Hebrew and Hebrew system from a Zionistic perspective without translation into Arabic. That was another, I think, landmark moment we could state at that stage in time. I think community's Rabbi Shaul Sitton Daba, who was mentioned about just a few minutes ago, because between 1850 to 1930 would oppose at that point in time Zionism and, let's just say, the changes of the modern, let's say, more modern structure over there, let's just say, and forbade hiring a teacher or a young teacher at that point in time, and would dismiss the chairman, if I'm not mistaken, whereupon the Jewish community established a Hatikva with a religious Zionist perspective and with a new teacher. Very, very interesting. So there was a lot of politics among the schools at that point in time, which direction some of these communities should actually take, let's just say. But very, very interesting. There was differences between Ashkenazic and the Sephardic and Lepan school structures at various point in time. And I think there was a Beit Yaakov school system inaugurated, I think, in the beginning of the 1940s, which was definitely a much more strong and a Haredi point of view. There was a split, I think, religious education camp between Mizrahi and Agudat Yisrael movements. I think come with the late 1940s, the various different schools will remain under different sponsorships. I think the Zionistic people would set up a class for girls, which in time developed into an education system. It included teacher training. The Zionistic Yitzhak Elchanan Yeshiva was established by someone named Rabbi Yaakov Fink, and in 1951 would number 25 girls and a total of 100 pupils, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be a key point about educational changes coming now. There's many flourishing schools in Argentina in itself, I think, from all over the religious spectrum, if I'm not mistaken. Another notable rabbi was Rabbi Michael Molcho. I think he passed away, he was 73 years of age. He died in Argentina, and he actually was, I think, the spiritual congregation leader of the Shalom Kehila congregation. He was a descendant of many great rabbis of the Molcho family. We've spoken about, actually came from Greece. He was actually originally born in Salonika and was serving as secretary of the Greek Zionistic Federation in 1921. He was the editor of the Greek Sephardic journal called the El Piorba, respectively. And his book on the Salonika Jewish cemetery was valuable in reconstructing the burial ground following its destruction by Nazis during the Second World War. I think he would eventually settle in Argentina in the year 1950 and will make his mark as rabbi over there. So he's another key rabbi, Rabbi Michael Molcho, also in Argentina. Other notable rabbis, there's famous Sheheba Sephardic Center that have recruited and brought many rabbis to Argentina. I think currently brought rabbis such as Tzvi Janovich, Rabbi Isaac Fada, Rabbi Avram Sher, and Rabbi Yehuda Struhl, if I'm not mistaken, to both Buenos Aires and Turkmen, also respectively, if I'm not mistaken, over there respectively. So many current rabbis over there. We're going to speak about other famous rabbis that have recently been rabbis in Argentina. Most notably, Rabbi Yosef Viton, who was born in Argentina, would serve as a rabbi in Buenos Aires before moving to Atlanta and later to New York. And Rabbi David Viton was actually ordained by the SSC and would serve as a chief rabbi of Shanghai. He was obviously from Argentina, and later on would now head the congregation Shaarei Zion in New York, also respectively. These are rabbis we have to point out. So other rabbis, you could say, have been leaders, let's say, and they're connected to the United States of America from Argentina. Rabbi Sergio Bergman, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he had the governmental position. Rabbi Shimon Axel Wanish, if I'm not mistaken. He's actually quite close to the current president, Rabbi President Javier Milei, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very interesting. So let's speak about Rabbi Yosef Bitton over here. He was actually born in Argentina. He's fluent in many languages, including in Spanish, Hebrew, and English. He's very well educated, you could say. Very good-natured. I've met him personally on several occasions before. I must say he's directed important community projects, many workshops, let's just say, audiences among various age groups. And he served as a rabbi of the Templo Shalom between the years 1985 to 1990. He was rabbi of congregation Agudat Dodim between 1992 to 1996. I think there were very large Sephardic congregations in Buenos Aires, respectively. So it's got a late 20th century rabbinic pulpit pedigree in Argentina. I think in 1996, Rabbi Bitton brought 40 families to Israel from Argentina. He would teach at Yeshivat Madalit, a Sephardic yeshiva, in Rishon LeZion for 2 years. I think in 1998 he would return to South America and then would be anointed the chief rabbi of Uruguay, where he was a spiritual leader of 15,000 families over there for 4 years. And then I think in 2002, it was around that time period, if I'm not mistaken, to 2003, he moved to Atlanta and was the rabbi of congregation Or Shalom over there respectively. And then later on in 2004 moved to New York. He began working as a congregation Shari Shalom, the Mashadi Jewish community, Persian congregation, for more than 1,000 families at a very prominent position, a synagogue I visited on many occasions before. I think he visited the Yeshivot of Sderot during his time, especially during the time period of the Lebanon War. He would do vital work with regards to congregation and especially I think since 2006, especially in the Mashadi community, he would actually support the Yeshiva of Sderot in of itself respectively, and later on take on various other positions also in New York. We have to point out now Rabbi David Bitton, I think his son, also from Argentina originally. I think in 2011 he was trained by the Sheva Sephardic congregation. He's the son of Rabbi Yosef Bitton, and he would become the chief rabbi of Shanghai also. Very, very prominent position. He made his name as a young and upcoming Talmud Chacham. It was apparent. He gave brilliant lectures and speeches, especially on Shabbat. And he has phenomenal knowledge with regards to Spanish, Portuguese, English, and Hebrew. So he basically is in connection with various different people from the United States, Panama, Europe, and South America. I think in 2019 he would return to New York and become the rabbi of the Shari Tzion congregation in Great Neck, also becoming the spiritual leader of that congregation. So that's another key rabbi, let's just say, in himself now. The rabbis of all the different scopes also. There's Marshall Mayer also, who was a prominent, let's say, rabbi in 1980 over there. I think he was an activist, human rights activist. I'm not sure if he was an Orthodox rabbi per se. He was an activist during the Dirty War. And Rabbi Tzvi Grumblat was appointed the head of Chabad Argentina, I think in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. And he was another rabbi, I think, Rabbi Algerando Avruj, I think in 1980s, respectively. So these are rabbis, just let's say, key people over there. To point out, I think Rabbi Tzvi Grumblat was a Chabad rabbi over there. He would arrive in Argentina in 1978. He was appointed the head Chabad in 1980 over there, and would bring about the first branch of Chabad in Tucumán. And that's Sekia, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a very, very as I say, an important role at that point in time. So that's very, very interesting. So let's explore some of the names of some synagogues in Argentina, respectively. Okay? There's many synagogues in Argentina, including the Agudat Dodim, I think it's a Sephardi synagogue, the Beit Chabad Almagro, the Abbas, it's a Chabad synagogue in itself. Beit Chabad Lamas, also Chabad. Beit Chabad Palermo, also a Chabad synagogue. Many Beit Chabads are over there. Querétaro, in Crespo, in Villa Devoto, respectively, another Chabad synagogue. There's many Chabad ones. Chabad Lubavitch, Argentina. Chabad Beit Menachem in Belgrano, I think was another one. There's a house in Palermo. There's Sukkot David, which is an Orthodox synagogue. Also, Templo Libredra, it's another Orthodox synagogue. Zichron David Talpiot, which is an Ashkenazi community. Maybe we can record another video, a third part, and explore some of the famous larger synagogues, let's just say, in of itself, of Argentina in the next part series. I think another famous, more recent Rabbi Daniel Oppenheimer. I think he's a rabbi of a Jewish Israel community in Argentina, respectively. Another famous rabbi, and he was close to other rabbis like Rabbi Raphael Moshe Gettinger, if I'm not mistaken. I think Rabbi Natan Finkel of the Yeshivat Mir, and the various other rabbis. I think he was born actually in Argentina, and lived obviously most of his life there. He would spend time in the United States and in Israel for yeshiva and kollel, if I'm not mistaken. He grew up in a rabbinic house. His father was a German Jewish rabbi, and would lead it in himself. And I think his father came to Argentina in 1953, and there was a synagogue of German-speaking refugees at that point in time, and really strengthened the Jewish community over there. And you would, being part of a rabbinic house, let's just say in itself, you would see that pedigree at that stage in time of the Argentine Jewish community. And he would testify Rabbi Oppenheimer within regards to the status of the Jewish community, how, especially with the help of the Syrian Jewish community, people would actually boom and it would increase. And I think he would even state in a recent interview 150,000 Jewish people in Buenos Aires, talking about 7,000 to 8,000 Jewish people going to Orthodox schools at that point in time, which is absolutely phenomenal. And the various different kashrut, excellent organizations that are at that point in time, and the effort that is coming within regards to that, he would actually testify in of itself. Okay, let's speak about Rabbi Gabriel Davidovich. I think he would become from 2013 the chief rabbi of Argentina, Ashkenazic chief rabbi. I think he was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and was educated in a local Orthodox community. He would study at Yeshivat Chavetz Chaim in Buenos Aires, also, which is interesting. And he would be part of the leadership team of that yeshiva at a later stage, alongside Rabbi Shmuel Ariel Levin, who's another great rabbi. Anyone tuning in now, we're exploring the history of the Argentinian Jewish community over here, so please join our channel and welcome over here, everyone. I think he would become the chief rabbi in 2013, head religious services for the Jewish community. He would strengthen halachic law, observance, Torah in of itself, provide answers to various questions in of itself, give guidance in religious matters, officiate weddings, be in charge of divorce, to adopt certifications, kashrut, burial, and very different matters. I think he was in intra-community roles, also representing the Jewish community on various different issues, and was corresponding in other Jewish communities also, respectively. I think he would be the chief rabbi for 9 years. April 22, he would end his role at that point in time as Ashkenazic chief rabbi. That's something we have to point out over there also. I think yes, very, very interesting. I think the 21st century has seen an interesting time period. Argentina, as we said before, has the largest Jewish population in Latin America. We talked about the various different cases there was of anti-Semitism, especially in 2000. I think in 2010, sadly, Argentina would announce its intention to join Brazil in recognizing an independent Palestinian state. So that was a sad state of affairs, which get huge criticism at that point in time from Israel, if I'm not mistaken. And I think in September 2017, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will put an official visit to Argentina, becoming the first Israeli Prime Minister in office to visit Argentina and Latin America. March 2019 was a key time period where the 2 Iranian citizens would use fake Israeli passports to leave Spain and enter Argentina. And Argentine police would arrest those subjects. Argentinian prosecutors discovered that the suspects had previously used fake passports to enter other countries. And I think in January 2020, President Alberto Fernandez would travel to Israel for the first presidential trip abroad. He would pay respects to the victims of the Holocaust and maintain bilateral meetings at that point in time, which has to be pointed out, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Something we had to point out. And It's actually interesting. In the 2023 presidential general election, Javier Milei, who was seen as a very good friend of the Jewish community, was elected the president and has pledged to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which was celebrated as he would visit the Kotel, the Western Wall, in December 2023, respectively. And he would announce that his government working to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, and he would visit Israel in 2024 again, I think February of that month, and very much would bring pro-Israel shift, let's just say, in the country itself. And in June 2025, he reaffirmed his pledge to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Very interesting. There's Isaac Accords in recent years between Argentina and Israel also. I think they were modeled under the 2020 Abraham Accords, which was officially announced. Isaac Accords are a diplomatic initiative inspired by Argentine President Javier Milei, receipt of the Genesis Prize, that aims to strengthen political, economic and cultural cooperation between Israel and various Latin American countries, starting with Uruguay, Panama and Costa Rica. I think this non-profit organization, the American Friends of Isaac Accords, was also launched in the same month. The organization was established with an initial $1 million from the Genesis Prize Foundation in honor of Milei's acceptance of the Genesis Prize in Jerusalem on June the 12th, 2025. So that's very interesting. Let's speak about a few of the communities in Argentina over here. One of the famous communities is the Baron Hirsch Synagogue. It's an Orthodox Jewish community in Almagro, a section of Buenos Aires, a famous one. Provides, let's just say, various important services, let's say, to Jewish families and surrounding communities. They have chesed programs, kindness programs. If I'm not mistaken, they help many, many people itself. People with no close relatives in itself. They have a night kollel learning program for the Jewish community. They have a Beit Midrash over there for non-kollel people. They have a synagogue services all throughout the days with many synagogue sefarim and library Torah books in itself. And it's a thriving Beit Midrash program in itself. They have kindergarten for schools. They provide kashrut, foods for people in of itself, and give scholarships for people. They have mikveh, also a purification bath, activities for adults and youth, Shabbatons, and various different Torah classes also, which is interesting. Other synagogues, we're going to speak more, maybe we can do a third part also. It's Filele Moshe Synagogue, and it comes back from the year 1912, which is like more of an Eastern European style synagogue over there. It's very, very interesting. And much more can be said within regards to that. Many of these synagogues over there, especially the Ashkenazi ones, really follow a Eastern European style synagogues over there. There's many. Maybe we're going to speak in the next series within regards to different synagogues in Argentina. We're going to try and do a part 3 at a later stage in time. Some more tidbits within regards to Argentina. It has the world's largest Spanish-speaking Jewish community. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The community swelled to as many as 450,000 people, and that is a huge number. I think now currently there's 180,000 to 220,000, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, very heavily concentrated in Buenos Aires at the moment, and there's other small, vibrant communities remain throughout the provinces. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of the Argentinian Jewish community, so please subscribe to the channel now and join our community over here. Very, very interesting. So welcome everyone, and we are a community here where we are exploring the Jewish community, and welcome everyone. At the moment we've recorded over, at this stage in time, about 30 countries already at least, which is absolutely staggering, we can say, and really going from strength to strength. So welcome everyone, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel also, and enjoy. So that's something we'll have to point out over here, friends. So welcome everyone over here to this channel, and please, at the moment it's a live video, so please keep your comments good over here, and that's what I'm stating, because there's sometimes a lot of anti-Semitic related comments, and those people will be removed, I'm going to say in the outset, from the channel if they post anti-Semitic channel comments here inside these videos. So that's what I'm just stating here from the onset over here. But friends, everyone, welcome to the channel, whoever is joined in as we explore the history of the Jewish community. Okay, it's actually interesting. Just to go back a bit, the Spanish Inquisition and subsequent expulsion, which we spoke about in the previous thing, would see the first people would actually, I think, come to Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, from Spain. That's something we spoke about in the previous class, also respectively. It's interesting, another tidbit, just using from the Chabad website, was that the first minyan was in a park, interesting enough. So because of Jewish immigration from Western Europe would begin in the second half of the 18th century, largely people from France. I think famously there were two Jewish people, Henry Joseph from Britain, and a German Jew was standing in a plaza, France, on Wednesday afternoon when the church bells called for mass. Everyone around them scattered and remained alone in the park, holding Yom Kippur prayer books. Although they both married Christian women, they agreed to form a minyan right there for the next Yom Kippur. That minyan ultimately became the first synagogue in Argentina. Very interesting enough. Now, as we said before, the Syrian Jewish community would arrive in the 1880s to Argentina, many from Syria. I think there were Spanish-speaking Moroccan Jews that also arrived previously. They shared language with locals and would be able to integrate in there. And then after the Moroccan Jews will come, there'll be a huge wave of Jews come from Syria, from Aleppo and Damascus before the First World War. They would bring solid communities there. They would build synagogues, mikvaot. They would build over there also, which we have to point out. They would kosher butcheries, let's just say, and so on and so forth. They would, and obviously the Syrian Jewish community is the backbone of Argentinian Jewish community here in modern day. We spoke about how in 1890 Jewish people would arrive from Argentina. Maurice de Hirsch, most notably, we spoke about that he would actually be helping over there and purchase land, if I'm not mistaken, to create agricultural colonies at that point in time. Another tidbit is that there were Jewish cowboys and farmers in Argentina. Many would return to Russia, and many people would go to local villages. I think, and it's actually interesting. There was Rabbi Aaron Goldman who would choose an area called Kiryat Moshe, if I'm not mistaken. And why was this? Because just as Moses led the Jews out of slavery in Egypt, his community escaped Tsarist Russia to the freedom of Argentina with the help of Baron Maurice de Hirsch. So because of that, let's say, there would be this Jewish shtetl, let's just say, which would be bustling over there with 3 synagogues. And I think there was even a Yiddish theatre they would start over there, and a Hebrew Teachers Academy, if I'm not mistaken. And that's why the name Moisesville would actually come about, which we spoke about previously. Now, we have to point out the pogroms that occurred in the 1920s, which we spoke about in the previous class over here. I think it originally started as a workers' conflict in a metal factory and became a full-fledged pogrom, the only one in America. So I think hundreds of Jews were attacked by masses, and it was encouraged by the government and police, especially in one neighborhood called the A La Casa de la Musa, Kaj Aroshion. It became the rallying cries of the mobsters, while the Jews tried to fend them off with Yo Argentino, I am Argentinian. The exact number of victims, as I say, is unknown, but the US Ambassador Frederick Jessup Stidman wrote that 1,350 people died and 4,000 were injured. Most of them, or primarily, were Russian Jews, which is now we talked about the local rabbis banning conversion that we did speak about before. There was an issue of a worry of inauthentic conversions, because many Jewish men want to marry Jewish women that don't want to convert the Shem Shemaim for the proper intentions. I think in 1927, 3 rabbis banded together to impose a takana prohibiting conversion to Judaism within the Argentinian territory. They were Rabbi Shaul Sultan, who we mentioned about before, Daba, Rabbi Aaron Goldman, who was a rabbi of the Ashkenazi community, and Rabbi Yosef Yedid. He was of the Syrian community in Jerusalem, Rabbi Yosef Yedid was. And I think at that point in time, the rabbinic ruling was a novelty in Jewish law. but let's just say it was ultimately adopted by all Orthodox communities within Argentina, as well as Syrian communities throughout the Americas, respectively. While nowadays there are Argentinian converts, they complete the process outside the country, if I'm not mistaken. They might go to Israel or other places, but I would recommend everyone to check. There's also another key, let's just say, Caesar Milstein was a local Jewish Nobel laureate, just using the Chabad tidbits over here, the websites over here. I think Argentina has produced as many as 5 Nobel Prize winners, including a Jewish doctor, Caesar Milstein. He's the son of a Jewish Ashkenazi family from Bahia Blanca, if I'm not mistaken. With others, he developed the hybridoma technique for the production of monoclonal antibodies and was awarded a prize in the year 1984. It's interesting. It's also, I think, the famous Rebbe. He's his first emissary in 1958, if I'm not mistaken. And I think before the Rebbe, Chabad Rebbe, sent for by Beryl Baumgarten to Argentina, Chabad and Chassidut was not that known over there, respectively. Known for his warmth and charisma, Rabbi Baumgarten attracted an eager crowd of youth hungry for a Chabad approach to spirituality. The first students he sent to study in Chabad yeshivot, I think in Israel and North America, would come back and form the basis of Chabad outreach in Argentina, which is very interesting enough. So Rabbi Baumgarten would explain that in comparison to the large new Chabad center in England, which I think at that stage in time he had recently visited, he didn't have much to show at that point in time, but they would open, and I think now more than 1,200 students have graduated from local yeshivot founded by Rabbi Chaim Lapidus and Professor Abraham Olichenko at the advice of Rabbi Baumgarten. Very interesting enough. So that's very interesting. I think there's even a large Sephardic Satmar community in Argentina. I think it was in the late 1950s. 3 wealthy Satmar families in Argentina brought a rabbi to lead their small community. Their community was based in Flores, where many Syrian Jews lived, and it brought about an infusion of young couples to the Satmar way of life. And by the 1970s, the original families had left the country, leaving the community with most the Sephardic members, which is very interesting. And we talked about what the attack happened in 1994. I think it's interesting in football matches, soccer matches. There's an Argentine famous football team called the Boca Juniors. I think they have many Jewish fans, thousands of them. So in the early 2000s, Chabad got the go-ahead to light a menorah at halftime during Hanukkah games, which was seen as an annual tradition at that point in time. Local rabbis opened kosher hot dogs and burger stands in these football places, and they would even put tefillin on people also, which is interesting. So I think there's another, as well as Buenos Aires being a Jewish neighborhood, I think Belgrano is also a popular Jewish neighborhood with 30,000 Jews. I think there's clothing, textile stores, and many yeshivot and synagogues over there, which is very interesting. I think currently there's 56 also Chabad centers in Argentina, which is under the leadership of Rabbi Tzvi and Sterner Grumblatt, initially in 1978. Many yeshivot, synagogues, and schools for women, and more than 2,000 students, social service organizations that serve children, seniors, and everyone in between also. So that's another interesting tidbit over there. And there's other communities in Argentina with Jewish education, mikvaot, synagogues, I think in Cordoba, in Rosario, in Tucumán, in Bahia, in Blanca, in Salta, Marta, Palta, and Concordia, if I'm not mistaken. And it's also home to the southernmost Chabad center in the world, in Bariloche, I think. Interesting enough. So that's another tidbit to point out over here. So I think we're going to do a part 3 because we want to speak more about the other synagogues and maybe touch more on the various youth organizations and maybe a few more rabbis we want to speak about from Argentina of yesteryear. So this is part 2 over here. We're talking about more of the current time period and the previous time period itself respectively, but we do definitely plan on doing a third part at a later stage. It's going to be this week or not per se, but we will hopefully record it at another stage of time, friends, over here. So friends, we're a community over here. We're learning about the different countries now all over the world. We've spoken already about 30 different countries across the world here on the series. We've spoken about Argentina today. We were able to speak about maybe about 8, 10 rabbis. We definitely do plan to make a part 3 series over here, a third class, because I think it's important. We didn't really get the countries. Also, already we've spoken about Brazil, Chile. We spoke about Bolivia also quite recently, another South American country. I think we've now covered maybe 10 South American countries, which is absolutely phenomenal, which is something we definitely wanted to do over here inside the series, and making fantastic progress also. So that's something we have to point out to our friends. Everyone, please subscribe to the channel. We're nearing at the moment on this channel 8,000 subscribers, which is a phenomenal achievement, and we're really going from strength to strength. So please subscribe and join and learn more as we explore the Jewish communities over here. And we spoke about Argentina today. We're going to try and do a third part series also in due course. And I think on this note, wishing you well and take care, and thanks everyone for watching, and wishing you well also. So thank you very much and have a great day.